got suspended from YouTube for showing videos from CNN and NBC breaking YouTube's rules. And then they suspended me for playing the videos, but the videos were still up on the corporate news sites. So anyway, thank you to everyone who bought my wine while I was in jail. I really appreciate it. It does help keep me going. So anyway, again, AllisonWinePromo.com. Thank you for reminding me about that. And since we're on that note, I am curious what you all think, because I actually, in a second, I want to play a clip that just came out. It was from the White House press conference yesterday, but curious what you all think about the community guidelines on these big tech platforms as relates to scientists being able to get the word out. Because, like Patrick, you're on Twitter and you're saying, hey, I did this thing in 2016 and I want people to help. And you're just trying to ask questions. But we're in such an environment that I think it's even difficult for scientists to just say, hey, I'm working on this. Can somebody take a look at my research and tell me, the blind spots? Is there another way to do this? Or I have had doctors on the channel who at the beginning of the pandemic were just on their own websites, not even these social media platforms, were on their own websites talking about how they were treating their patients, what was working, what was not working, thinking that's what doctors did. And the federal government came after them and said, you can't talk about that. So it just seems very difficult in today's environment to, and I don't know if you've seen this in the past. Obviously, this is the first pandemic I've been through as a YouTuber, so I don't know what it was like. What it would have been like, back with another virus, and I don't even know if YouTube was at the level that it's at now. So maybe it wouldn't have made a difference. But just curious, your initial thoughts on can you do science on YouTube or Twitter or Facebook, or and maybe not even do science, but discuss science? Is it antithetical to science? The sort of more punitive standards that we continue to see?
I think I'd like to start by answering that question by saying, gee, what a shocker. Scientists are human beings, and so are politicians, and they make mistakes, and they are a part of groups that they don't want other people to be a part of. And the media thing is one thing that certainly people need good information, but I feel like you also can't trust necessarily one source for that at any time. Like, that's dangerous to have also say, well, this is the official line and no one is allowed to discuss it. That's not healthy discussion either. But unfortunately, one thing I think I've learned throughout this, and I knew this being a scientist and hanging out with other scientists, that they're human beings too. And a lot of the time they don't necessarily want to listen to your ideas either, because maybe they did their graduate research work on something else that you are questioning now. And like I said, we live in a world with human beings and we have to get along with them. And we all are guilty of it ourselves at times too, where we can be short-sighted or have blinders on. And hopefully one of our colleagues will gently say, okay, this is a good idea. We really need to explore this. But it might just take some time for people to want to answer that question, because I think at some point when you don't have all the information, it will become obvious to you that you don't have all the information, whether it's, like I said, from the White House or other scientists or previously published work, that you'll want those answers. That's what science is all about, is looking for information. And so if you feel like you don't have the information that you need, I think we should all look for it. But yeah, it's hard. And like I said, social media unfortunately has a lot to do with it, with clamping down on people who are questioning narratives. But it's also true that, like I said, scientists are human beings too, and they don't necessarily want to listen to other scientists' ideas as well.
I mean, I would say, Julia, I think some scientists have actually behaved very badly by trying to close down the discussion. And I think it's in the short run it can work, but in the long run you just lose everybody's trust, and you may not be right. That's the thing about science. It's fundamental that you always have to keep questioning, and something can be a good answer for a long time, and then eventually you find that you need to look more closely at it. And I think it's actually very strange that there are no good answers in this question of seasonality. That the fact that we were able to write our paper is I think rather extraordinary, but it's obviously something people should be thinking about. And I think you know, all these questions, like, you know, the controversial things, the origin of the virus and things like that. I think it's very harmful and short-sighted to just to try and close the argument down. So I completely agree with what you're saying, Alison.
I'll get to a question that just came in on ROKFIN on this vein, but let me just play this real fast, and y'all tell me if you can't hear it very well. But this was Jen Psaki, White House press secretary. I believe this is yesterday.
And information. Sometimes those are accurate news items reported by some of your outlets or accurate information shared by a neighbor. Sometimes there is information that is not. It is hard to discriminate. As we know, this is not a new issue, but it is an issue that is impacting people's lives. So a couple of the steps that we have, that could be constructive for the public health of the country are providing for Facebook or other platforms to measure and publicly share the impact of misinformation on their platform and the audience it's reaching. Also with the public, with all of you, to create robust enforcement strategies that bridge their properties and provide transparency about rules. You shouldn't be banned from one platform and not others for providing misinformation out there. Taking faster action.
Okay, so she basically says, as you just heard her, that, you know, you shouldn't just be banned from one, you should be banned from all. And then, she, you know, it's interesting because prior to that, she makes mention of like, hey, it's working with you guys too, the mainstream news. And you're like, okay, so basically, are we just like admitting that the government is influencing the mainstream press, you know, the corporate press, and the social media companies? So basically they're all just like working together, and they're just one arm of, you know, the other's interest, I guess. And I don't, you know, I'm a former TV news journalist, and I know even prior to this that the tendency to just go with sort of the bureaucratic narrative was very common, because the level of scrutiny that we would give somebody like you two, if you called us and said, hey, you know, this is happening, we want to talk about it, we'd have, oh, okay, well, you know, how can we confirm this? Or we need to see some more information. But if the Department of Health says it, we just repeat it. And I don't know. It's just like, you just think they're the safe source, which is weird, because, you know, we know that the governments, don't always tell the truth. And they also, even if they're not necessarily being nefarious about things, just like Julia said, they get things wrong too. You know, it's not like they're always right, and the person on the outside is just more dangerous by virtue of just not working for the government. There are all kinds of problems there. But curious if you guys have any reaction specifically to that, or I could ask you the question that just came through on ROKFIN about it.
Well, I think it brings back to what I just said, that you don't want a single source for anything. You want to have multiple sources, because, okay, some of them are going to be wrong, but how do you know your one source isn't wrong as well? So to me, that's the way science should be and was prior to 2020, where the solution to bad information is more information. You just want more people to, and as long as people have equal access to all of that information, which on the internet, fortunately, you do. Like, everybody can see whatever anybody else is saying for the most part, and you can get a lot of information from a lot of people, and it's always buyer beware. And I think a lot of people know that already. So I don't understand why we have to have clamping down and an official source to tell you X, Y, or Z, because that's single source, and that's always bad.
I think it would be a nightmare if being banned from one outlet means you're banned from all of them. I think that would be an absolutely terrible idea, because it's you know, we're really very powerless when these very arbitrary steps are taken. So I think that would be a terrible idea. And it's what Julia said. You know, the scientific establishment doesn't always get things right, and you know, you have to be able to question it. And I've seen some terribly reasonable channels which are really right in the middle and very, very moderate being taken down, or being at least, you know, not promoted. You know, they only get their own subscribers. They don't get links from YouTube, this type of thing. So yeah, I think there is a problem here.
I don't want to interrupt you, Patrick, if you had more to say, but I think that also we're not discussing like water is wet. That's not the concept we're discussing here. We're discussing things like, should I take a vaccine that still hasn't gone through its full licensure process, especially if I'm young and I'm unlikely to get, I'm not saying that there aren't young people that have gotten COVID, but it's also true that, I come from a world where I generate data for licensure of therapeutics, and we have to generate a lot of data for that. And I'm not telling people to take the vaccines, not take the vaccines. I don't know your personal situation, so everybody has to make that decision for themselves. But to say that we're just going to have one channel who's going to tell you something from a scientific perspective, why you should take the vaccine, but like I said, this is, or anything else, why you should wear a mask, why you should distance, why you shouldn't go see your grandparents, all the things that we've been discussing. These are not water is wet concepts. These are controversial. These have pros and cons. They go beyond science. I always say that science gives you information, but it cannot tell you what to do. That's when your values come in. And somebody who really needs to go see their 80-year-old, dying mother is going to have a different calculus versus somebody who their parents are in fantastic health and will probably be around for another 20 years. That's completely different. So giving everybody a blanket statement and then saying that, well, science is telling you to do this, that's silly.
I think we're at the point where it would be safest for us to jump over to ROKFIN only. So if you are watching this on YouTube, check out the links in the description and head on over to see it, where we will not be removed. Anything else you guys want to add, though, about specifically your research for the YouTube audience?
I think I would like to say I welcome anybody taking an interest in our ideas, and we have found it very, very hard to kind of break through to well-known scientists and get them to think about what we're doing. And there's really no good reason for this, because what we're saying is really quite, it's really what folk wisdom says, which is if you get it, your grandmother told you put on a sweater, if you get chilled, you may get a cold. But this has become, over the years, this has been rejected by the scientific establishment, and they're just beginning to think about it again because there's so much data showing that there is this connection. So I would say we welcome the interest of any interested person to just read our papers and follow us on Twitter and ask other scientists what they think of the theory.
Yeah, and I just love both scientists and the general public, because the general public is looking for explanations. People have been telling them for this entire past year that if you wear your mask and you distance and get a vaccine, then we'll get rid of this. You have to argue that that's not really happening. So okay, so if those aren't the explanations or the best explanations, maybe they're part of it, but if we're just focusing on stopping transmission, but we're not looking at, okay, viruses are kind of everywhere. What makes them activate? What makes you actually sick? Who's susceptible? Can I treat you? Let's focus on all of that to get rid of the illness and destruction that we're seeing, rather than just, well, if we stop transmission, then we're done. Well, that's only part of the puzzle. So we're not focusing on all of the puzzle. So we would really like to see a greater discussion about what are all the ways we can stop this among the general public, scientists, and of course, yes, we would love some scientists to do some experiments. And there's probably a pretty small number of people who could actually do them. But we hope that we'll pique their interest.